Being a Christian is great if you don't want anything. Being a Christian is great if you don't want anything. If you just want God, you don't want to enjoy anything else, then I'd say being a Christian is one of the best things on the earth. It's one of the most blessed things I could think of. If you do it right, if you're not judgmental, if you're not religious, if you're not ascetic, if you're not into asceticism, if you're not into separatism and weird, because there's a lot that can get weird about religion, but if you're just pure in heart and you're just simple, you just love God, you love Jesus, being a Christian is wonderful because you don't have anything to worry about. I mean, the Bible is amazing when it comes to, cast all your anxiety onto me, But the Bible also is a book that has a lot of warnings. It's a book that has a lot of, I guess you could say, rules or even laws, in the sense that do this and there's going to be a certain outcome, And I would say it's I can't find fault in it really, as far as objectively speaking. People want to pick apart certain things of the Old Testament, blah, 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 right? But they don't realize that those stories are contextual. They don't realize that certain things that happened are just messed up because the situation was messed up, and there's a lot of nuance that people skip over. But when it comes to the spiritual, ideological rules, so to speak, or laws even of the Bible, and I use that term loosely, I don't mean laws as in literally the laws that, like the Old Testament law. That's not what I mean. I mean like like do unto others as you do unto you. That's kind of a spiritual law or a spiritual rule. Like you're gonna get back what you put, what you put out there, right? So that's kind of a rule or an ideological law, spiritually speaking. So if you're simple, if you're just a simple Christian, it's wonderful to be a Christian. It's a blessed thing. It's easy because you don't have anything to worry about. You don't worry. You're not worried about clothing. The Lord said, don't worry about clothing. You're not worried about anything, because God said don't worry about anything. You're not worried about things. You're just trusting God, and God will provide, right? So you don't care. But when it comes to the world, you're worried about everything. Oh, what color car do I want? What kind of shoes do I want? And everything is, go on Amazon or Walmart or, whatever shopping place there is, and you just got lists and lists of millions of products. Well, that's a lot of confusion. That's a lot of headache, right? So life, and you see it on people. You see it on people's faces. They work so hard for these temporary things. The Bible says store up treasures in heaven. It says store up treasures in heaven where moths and rust and dust won't come and corrode and corrupt, which is that's a wonderful law. It's a wonderful rule, right? It's a wonderful spiritual. It's fantastic. We are really only here temporarily. We get 80 years if we're lucky. 80 years. A lot of people only get 60. A lot of people only get 65, 70. You're lucky if you get 80. You're really lucky if you get 90. But after 80, you really want to live that life. But anyway, it's a short time, man. It's a short time. It really is. And when you're young, you think it's so long. When you're young, you think you got so much time, but you really don't. There's really 10 years, 20 years. It goes by quick, man. It just does. Unless you just hate your life, and then it goes slow, which is terrible. Yeah, if you don't want anything, being a Christian's great. The problem is when you start wanting stuff. That's really the problem to life in general. Once you start wanting stuff in life, all kinds of problems come. You want to experience something. You want to own something you like. You really want to have a cool wardrobe. You want to drive a cool car. You want to, a lot of people dream about owning a farm. I want to own a farm. I want to travel. I want to have this cool hobby that I like. I want to collect all these things. When you want stuff, then life becomes a problem, because then you got to go out and you got to get it. You got to make the money and you got to do it. And then there's a lot, and then they got whole philosophies behind doing that. How do you make money? How do you get rich? Everything's compartmentalized, and everything is really just systematized, and I'd say that system is corrupt. A lot of people trust that system as if that system has integrity. The world system is riddled with corruption. It doesn't have integrity. Yes, there's some good things out there. There's some good concepts, some good avenues, some good knowledge, wisdom to help you along your way to achieve your goals and to reach ultimate happiness. There's things out there that you can employ and apply. Sure, you can apply things, but it's also riddled with corruption. There's lots of lies. People are selling dreams. This is what it's a sordid, evil, ugly world because Satan exists in it, right? That's why he's the one who does all this. He's the one who compartmentalizes all this crap. He's the one who does all the marketing, right? All the marketing for the world system. He's behind all this stuff. God's simple. God was just, all he said was, eat of me. That's all he said. He placed man in the middle of the garden in Genesis chapter 3, and he just said, eat. He said, you can eat of all the trees in the garden except for one. And he gave him a warning, don't eat of that tree. And what was the result when they did? Sin entered into mankind, and the rest is history. Look at man's history. Look at mankind's history. It's just disgustingly evil. Just vile, vile, vile. I mean, anybody who reads history understands that human history is crazily vile. It's just bonkers how horrible. People get all up in arms about, modern day racism, modern day this, modern day that. These problems that we have in our world are just silly compared to history. If you actually read history and learn the horrible, just evil crap that went on. And there's a horrible, evil crap that's going on now, too. It never stops because, the world is corrupt. The world's evil because Satan's here. Again, it's his world. He runs it. That's what the Bible says, is that he's got an illegal rule over the world, right? So yeah, it's a sordid system. So it's better to just leave it. This is the whole picture of Exodus. That's the whole point of the book of Exodus. That's what that word Exodus means. It means leaving. It means departure. From what? From the world system. What's the world system? Egypt. Egypt is in typology is the world system. What were the children of Israel doing in Egypt? They were slaves building storehouses for Pharaoh. Well, what's going on today? The same thing. What are all the wage slaves doing? What are all the workers of the world doing? They're building storehouses for Pharaoh. They're building other people's companies, making other people rich. These other people are living luxurious, nice lives with all their money, and because they started a company, or they figured it out, or they did this, or they did that, and so they feel that they're superior to their workers, and then they can get paid 500 times more than their average minimum wage worker, which is just disgusting. I mean, the world's disgusting. It's all slavery in one way or another. And the way the system is set up is if you don't work, you don't eat. Right? You don't work, you starve. You go homeless, right? Whatever. So we're forced to be slaves. But that's also part of the curse. If you read the Bible, if you read Genesis, God cursed man to toil the ground, right? And so that's part of the curse, and that's what we're supposed to do. But again, I mean, in my experience, I get sad sometimes because it's easy to read the Bible and be like, oh yeah, I give my life to God and I want to follow Jesus, and that's the easy part. That little decision you make with that. The hard part is actually doing it. The hard part is walking it out. The hard part is denying the world, denying your desires, your goals, and your hidden plans, and your hidden dreams, and your hopes and for things, denying that. What did Jesus say? He says, he who wants to follow me must deny his soul life. I mean, that's the most basic thing. That's one of the most basic things he said. It's one of the first things he said. He who wants to follow me, deny your soul life. You can't serve two masters. You can't serve God and mammon. What is mammon? It's self-gain. You can't serve God and mammon. And I know that, personally speaking, I failed in that matter. I really have. I've failed in that matter. I've sought mammon while seeking God. I wanted both. I guess I wanted my cake and eat, and to eat it too. And it's sad and it's messed up. And, I spent a lot of years, I guess, in depression. I spent a lot of years in regret, and I had a dysfunctional family growing up. Mental illness was in my family, addiction, substance abuse, all you name it. Well, I wouldn't say you name it, but we had a lot of problems. So I had a lot of damage from that, and that carried over into my adulthood, and that carried over. You just don't get over things. Things don't just magically disappear. Things like trauma, things like dysfunction, and they just don't disappear. They just go dormant, or they go somewhere else in your body, and you might have weird backed up emotions you didn't even know you had to deal with. You didn't even know they were there because you buried them. Because it's not necessarily healthy to just bury our emotions or deny, not I say deny, but close off our love, or close off our feelings and things like that. And the world is a vampire. That song, "The World is a Vampire." It really is. It just sucks you. It just sucks your energy. It sucks your time. It sucks your soul, because it's so unforgiving. It's so damaging. People are ruthless. Not saying everyone, but how often you meet kind, loving people? They're out there for sure. But there's a lot of them out there. A lot of people are, and you'll come across it if you look for it. But a lot of times we end up with damaged people. We can't pick our families. We end up with damaged environments. We can't pick our, a lot of it's just the luck of the draw. Some people are a lot more blessed than others. I guess you could use that word blessed, or some people are just a lot more lucky than others. I don't know why. I don't know why these things happen. I don't know why. I wish I did, but I don't. There's so much that just seems so random. Why is this person successful in this way and I'm not? Why does this person seem blessed and I don't? Why is, and it's just, it's that's your own desires. That's your own selfish hopes and wishes, but we all have them, and people will argue, is that wrong? Is it wrong to want things? Is it wrong to like things? Is it wrong? And they might say, well, you're reading this Bible and it's telling you not to be happy. It's telling you not to enjoy things. That's not cool. That's not fun. Like, life is to be enjoyed. We should be out here, enjoying things. We should be having a good time, and so that's where the rubber meets the road for a real Christian. A real Christian gets that test, is that, okay, do you really want to leave everything for God? Do you really want to love God solely and And I say most people don't. Most Christians don't. They might have a percentage in them. They might sound good on paper. You know, maybe 10% of them wants God, or 20, 30, 40% even wants God, but, or maybe even 80, 90% wants God. But there's this little sliver of holding back. No, I don't want to give up my, you know, my weight loss goals, or that's a terrible example. Excuse me. No, I don't want to give up my cool car. I don't want to give up my, you know, whatever it is, right? We don't want to give stuff up, you know. I don't want to give up on my dreams. I want to fulfill my fantasy of traveling the world. I want to fulfill my fantasy of, you know, being a professional deep sea diver or something, you know. And it's like, not to say there's anything necessarily wrong with those things. I'm not saying they're inherently bad. It's just that when God said, you know, he who wants to come after me must deny his soul life, he meant that. He means, you know, you're out here self-seeking. You're out here seeking things for yourself. You can't really follow me very well. And it's true, I think. Most people are selfish. We're just designed that way. Or I wouldn't even say we're designed that way. We're maybe warped into being that way, narcissistic, right? You know, people are selfish, and people argue that there's nothing wrong with that. I'd say in some contexts there's nothing wrong with that, or I'd say in some contexts it's, you know, maybe a good thing, right? It might save your life. It might help you. You know, it just depends. Everything's variable. Excuse me. But I don't know, man. You know, I suffered a lot in my life. You know, I went through a lot of trauma. And for me, I was like, you know, when's this going to end? When am I going to start being happy? When am I going to start enjoying life? And I'm tired of things happening. Because it's just in my life, it was one thing after another. I think from day one, you know, I just remember even back from like 5 to 7 years old, I remember realizing that my parents were dysfunctional, realizing that we were super poor. I mean, we grew up on, I mean, I was born in this small little farm city out in the middle of Washington, out in apple country, you know, farms all around us. And we lived in this house, but I was too young to remember that. And then we moved into this apartment, and I remember that. That's some of my first memories, really, in this apartment. And you know, I enjoyed being outside. I like, you know, certain things were ideal. It was the 80s, you know, I was a kid in the 80s. Excuse me. And that was it was a sort of more ideal time. You know, things progressed in the 90s to the point where people just, it was all about progress. It was all about, you know, the come up. But the 80s still had, excuse me, but the 80s still had, you know, some of that leftover Americana about them. You know, the 80s still had some of that leftover wholesome Americanness about them. You know, that old school wholesome American, you know, where everybody was outside, everybody was enjoying family and stuff. You know, they still had values to some degree in the 80s. 90s was when all that kind of went away, and then it just got hyperized in the 2000s and beyond, where people just became a lot more disconnected from values, from wholesome values and things like that. Anyway, I'm not sure why I'm talking about that. I'm going off on these tangents, but yeah, I had a somewhat ideal in the sense that, like, yeah, we went swimming sometimes, and I was always outside riding my bike, and we'd have family picnics. We'd go camping sometimes, and you know, those kind of activities that people used to do pre-internet days. You know, back when people used to go outside, they would do outside stuff. We would go outside, we'd ride bikes, we'd ride skateboards, we'd find things to get, you know, climb trees, find mischief to get into, you know, go explore, go, you know, do things like that, build forts, you know, play sports, you know, just stuff that people used to do. I mean, people still do stuff like that, but you know, it's not quite the same. You did it back then by almost by necessity. Now it's like, you know, oh, you got a hobby or something, you know, do this or you know whatever. But it's just like no one cares anymore. But back then it was like, I don't know, it just seemed like it was a better world. But then it's also in a bubble, you know, everything's relative. Anyway, and I'm sure people still do stuff, but so yeah, man. And then something happened where I realized at 5 and 7, you know, we're poor, and we were dirt poor, very poor, and you know, not like insanely poor, where like we couldn't afford beans or something, but we were poor, we were scraping by, and I've been scraping by my whole life. So I think part of me when I came to God was I thought like, you know, oh, he's gonna bless me, or he's gonna take care of me, at least, you know, at least he's gonna take care of me. But then we have lust, and we have things that come in, and like, oh, you know, I want a girlfriend, or I want a girl, or I want a cool car, or I want nice clothes and things, and so this is where the problems start to rise, you know. But for me, coming into that was like, you know, I've already suffered so much in my life, you know, because I mean, I'm not going to sit here and just mention all the stuff I've been through, but it's been a lot. And so at a certain point, I was just like, you know what? I'm tired of that. I'm tired of suffering. And then I got sick when I was, you know, just coming into my 20s. And it's like, you know, I went through this you know, I just felt like this is not fair. You know, God doesn't love me. God doesn't care about me because, you know, I heard this saying the other day. This girl goes, you know, I don't trust God because, you know, when I wanted things to work out, they never did. And so I don't trust him to work things out because things never worked out for me, you know, in my past. And I'm just, you know, that's pretty profound. It's kind of true, you know. And I've met people who are like, oh, yeah, God's done everything for me and my life is so beautiful. And I'm just like, God, I wish I could relate with that, you know. I just been through hell, you know, dysfunctional family growing up, poverty, all kinds of problems, you know, just stuff that blow your mind if I told you. But became an adult and got sick, you know, and couldn't, you know, because a lot of people are like, oh yeah, once I hit 18, I'm gonna go after my life, and some people get it, some people achieve it. I'm gonna go after everything I want, and I'm gonna live a better life. Da da da. Well, I couldn't do it because I got sick, and so okay, well, okay, God, well, you give me this really crappy childhood. Um, I mean, sure, not as bad as some, but pretty crappy. Uh, and then I hit 18 and I get sick, have a mental breakdown. I'm in a hospital for 3 days. They tell me I got schizophrenia, but I didn't have it, but they thought I did. You know, left there and tried to figure out what was going on. Had to quit my senior year of high school. Graduated later on, you know, with a GED. Or no, I think I got a diploma or whatever, but technically I got a diploma, but it was kind of almost like a GED, I forget. Anyway, kind of weird. But then I got sick, and then not only that, couldn't find a decent girlfriend to save my life. Went through a bunch of girls who were toxic and kind of slutty, and that's when I got red pilled, and you know, really got red pilled. But I went through some stuff in high school. But so my thing is like, I guess I understand that, like, hey, you know what? We're just living this life. And it's always something. And I got something stuck in my throat. Always something. I can't get any respite, any rest. Always something. Anyway, yeah, thinking that, oh, once I become a Christian, God's going to take care of me. It's going to be all good. But then it's not. And you realize, oh, the Christian life is about suffering. A lot of it is. A lot of it's about suffering. And then you're like, what did I sign up for? But you don't really have any other options. You don't really have any, there's nothing else you can do, because you're trapped. Because it's like, you can't, Satan's out in the world, things are negative, apart from God, But then when you go to God, it's not an easy road either. You're supposed to have fellowship with Him, but then you got sin, and then you got other things in your heart, so that doesn't really work out. So you're kind of screwed. Everything, you're screwed if you want something. You're screwed if you don't have a pure heart. You're screwed if you're not absolute for God. And then He doesn't heal you, or He doesn't make your life situation better, or you're still poor, or you're still single, or you're still, suffering in various ways, or this thing, for me, like, I've suffered with depression my whole adult life. When I was a kid, I went through depression. It was different, but I was still able to function. When I got sick, I couldn't function. In the sense I couldn't function like an adult. I couldn't be normal, even though I'm not like so disabled that I can't walk, or I'm not like. Anyway, it's very complicated, and I don't like to get into details on that too much. But essentially, picture somebody who's disabled but doesn't look like they're disabled, doesn't act like they're disabled, but is disabled. Basically, that's me. And I've been like that since I was 20. Basically my entire adult life. Actually, 18 is when I had my first mental breakdown. So basically 18. So really my entire adult life, from pretty much day one of adult life. Dealing with that, right? And then the consequences of that, which is women don't want you, because they don't want a dud, they don't want a loser, they don't want a defective man. It's in their DNA, so you suffer like crazy through that. The only thing positive, I guess I could say, that came out of that was, I guess I did a lot of red pill stuff. I don't know if I helped anyone. Maybe I did. Some people said I helped them. But I had a lot to talk about, obviously. I guess I got a fairly good mind somewhat, even though I'm boring as hell and nobody watches my videos. I get that. But, yeah, I got educated. I don't know if it's all that great. I think I'm fairly smart in some ways, but I can't really apply it to anything, because when you're disabled, you don't have a lot of consistency in how you behave, and how you behave, but also how how reliable you are, and you're not reliable when you're disabled. So you can't do much. Can't really apply. If you have some intelligence, you can't really apply it towards anything, because you just can't be consistent. And anyway, for me, I wanted stuff. I wanted a girlfriend, so I got them, but they all turned to crap. Well, they're all bad experiences at the end of the day. And I wonder if God caused them to be bad on purpose. But then it's like, well, okay, if you're gonna do all that, if you're gonna hurt me, if you're gonna make my life shitty, born into a shitty family, and I'm not sitting here saying my entire life was shitty. I've had great moments. I've had lots of great moments. I've had a lot of enjoyment in my life. I've enjoyed a lot of different things. I've had successes, and I could talk about those, go off on a tangent, but I just say I've had a lot of successes in certain ways. In smaller ways, I've had a lot of successes. But when it comes to grand picture, fully functional adult, have your own home, have a loving wife, have, you know, nice kids, have a good job, solid career, enjoy your work, be respected by peers, have a couple friends, you know, all these things, all that is foreign to me. All that, I was never able to achieve any of it. And I know I'm not sitting here acting like I'm this victim or I'm just complaining, you know, because I know a lot of people in my generation are in the same boat, and I know a lot of people, you know, they're just not blessed in that way, and probably they never will be. I understand that. You know, we live in a hard time. We're always, you know, humans have always been living in a hard time, but living in a hard time for men. You know, it's not the 1950s. It's not last century when things were easier on men, where they could just go out and get a job anywhere and get a home mortgage and start a life. It's not like that, you know. So it's hard for men. It's hard for men. So, you know, that's my background. You know, just suffering, loss, pain. But I've also had a lot of good times, had a lot of cool experiences. I believe God blesses me in some ways, but it's a subtle way. It's not the big things yet. You know, not the big things yet. Never had a family, never had a career, never made a lot of money. Always struggling for money. Always struggling to survive and things like that. You know, I know that's not an uncommon thing. You know, I know that many people are in that boat, but I don't know. You know, I really had an impression that maybe I was naive, but I really had an impression when I became a Christian that God was going to do all that for me, and then He kind of didn't. Yes, He's maintained my life. I've had good food to eat. You know, pretty much almost always. I've had a roof over my head. You know, I've had, you know, I got clothes and stuff like that. But there's a lot of pain. It comes with a lot of pain. You know. So it makes you wonder. It makes you wonder if it's all worth it. You know, I don't know. What's the alternative? You know, do better. Okay. You know. Anyways, guys, it's just some food for thought. I'm getting real tired, and I'm gonna have to turn this off. But I just want to touch on some things, and you know, it's hard not to be disappointed when things don't work out for you. It's hard not to be disappointed when you don't get screwed. You know when you get screwed over in a lot of ways. Is it all worth it? We'll find out in the end, I think. Appreciate you listening. It's been Jay Lee. One more thing is that I will say that I have had a lot of great times with God. I have enjoyed God a lot. I have had a lot of fellowship, you know, intimately with God. And those things are precious. You know, those moments are precious, and those experiences, you know, keep you going, and those experiences sustain you and help you to you know, I guess put things in perspective. But you suffer a lot, you know, and you wonder why, and there's no answer. You don't know why. Is it your fault? Something you did? Maybe. Does the suffering justify the action? I don't know. Really don't know. Job's suffering was totally unjustified in the Bible. Job's suffering was totally unjustified. He was just you know, a man who had integrity and who was following God to the best of his ability at that time for what he knew. And yet God stripped him of everything. God took everything away from him. You know, how must that feel? You know, I've had scenarios where I've had a lot taken away from me, and a lot of fear of my future and things like that. But then, God's there, I guess. God's always there. He's always with us. And so, I don't know, man. Maybe you don't always get what you want and you get what you need. Maybe that's kind of it. Maybe you want some things that aren't what God wants for you, and maybe he's got to come in and frustrate those other things that you want somehow. I don't know. Just an interesting way to think about it. But anyways, guys, I'm going to end it. Appreciate you listening. Jay Lee, Northwest Podcast. Peace.